This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nizzahon, and it's Saturday, and that means it's time for another edition of Nizzanotes, my weekly vlog series where I talk about limited magic. This week we're taking our first look at Streets of New Capenna, the brand new set that will be fully revealed next Friday, or this Friday, I guess, from when this video will be coming out. And so in this very first video, you're getting my very early impressions about the mechanics, the new mechanics. Well, they're not all new, but the mechanics in the set. I'm recording this right after the preview stream. I'm going out of town this weekend. So by the time this video actually comes out, it's possible there's more mechanics, but I don't think so. Usually we get all the mechanics, at least the ones that appear on multiple cards. You know, maybe we'll see completed or something like that on another Planeswalker. But we get all the mechanics in these, debut streams that kick off preview season. We usually get them all in that stream. And so that's what we'll be looking at here. I'll talk a little about, how good I think these mechanics might be in Limited, and also what they might say about the various archetypes for each of these 5 crime families. So let's jump right in. So to start with, a big point of emphasis in this set is going to be 3-color factions. It's going to be like we saw in Khans of Tarkir or Alara, where the 3-color factions are a big deal, not where it's sort of a sub-theme like we saw in Ikoria. Instead, they're going to be very focused, and each of these factions has their own mechanic. And we're going to start with a look at the Obscura mechanic, which is Connive. And Obscura, if you know the Shards of Alara, is Esper, and that means the blue-white-black color combination. So the Connive mechanic is looting, but with some extra stuff going on. When you loot, as usual, you draw a card and then discard a card. But if it's a Connive-triggered loot, if a Connive ability is what triggered your loot, if you discard a non-land card, the creature that caused you to Connive gets a +1/+1 counter. And that's really interesting. It's sort of like combining loot with explore. And this is going to make for some interesting decisions. Sometimes when usually when you loot, you want to discard lands, especially in the later part of the game. But sometimes looting and discarding a non-land is going to make sense because you get an immediate boost. You get something that affects the board right away. And whatever card you draw is usually not going to be something that can affect the board immediately. And so you're going to have interesting decisions with this mechanic. It's going to be interesting to see if they also throw in some graveyard synergy, because if they do, that could make this mechanic really powerful, because you could discard non-lands without any real downside and still get counters and then bring stuff back from your graveyard. But overall, like we can see on Ledger Shredder here, Connive looks pretty nice. I do want to point out, at this very early stage of preview season, again, recording this on, the Thursday immediately after the preview stream, the leader for the Obscura has a number value attached to Connive, while Ledger Shredder does not. So it may be that we see like Connive 2 or Connive 3, where you do this multiple times, whereas Ledger Shredder only has you do it once. And Ledger Shredder looks like a pretty nice card if we're just, evaluating the card. A 2-mana 1/3 flyer that loots anytime any player casts their second spell is already something that would be a pretty nice card. And then adding this Connive upside to the loot is really good. This looks like a pretty quality card and a very good 2-drop. And, the guild leader also looks quite powerful, especially because you can Connive a ton and just add counters in, very quickly. So yeah, that's the Connive mechanic. Looks pretty interesting. I love the explore mechanic. And like I said, it's sort of like loot plus explore, where you make these decisions, about what you decide to do with the card you reveal. And there's a chance you could get, a bonus, or you could just loot normally with Ledger Shredder and other cards with Connive. And I like those sort of decision points. Next up, there is Cabarretti. This is what was Naya on, in Alara. This is the red, white, green color combination, and their mechanic is Alliance. And this is basically Creature Fall. This is a mechanic we saw in one of the Modern Horizons sets, I think. It's called Alliance, but basically something happens whenever another creature enters the battlefield. You can see here on Devilish Valet, it doubles its power every time a creature enters the battlefield. And there's a number of things going on within Naya that indicate that it is a go-wide deck. And that means making creature tokens, for example. If you make 2 tokens when Devilish Valet is in play, suddenly it's a 4/3. And obviously, if you make more tokens, it gets even crazier. The leader of the Cabarretti is all about your creatures going really wide, and so it's supported there. And the Cabarretti charm also indicates that you want to be going wide. There's going to be a lot of ways to trigger these alliance abilities. And while I don't think Devilish Valet is the most impressive card ever, especially for a rare, I imagine there's going to be some powerful things you can do with Alliance. And even, once you're making 3 tokens or whatever with the Valet in play, it does become a massive problem. And I don't think it's bad by any means, I should say. This is a very early evaluation, but I think it's just, a pretty good card, not a great one or anything like that. But yeah, so it's going to be about going wide, getting triggers when creatures enter the battlefield, and making tokens, especially because that's the easiest way to trigger Alliance multiple times. So that's Cabarretti. Looks like it's going to be an aggressive go wide deck with creature fall / Alliance really tying the deck together. Next up, there is the Maestros. This is the group I was most excited for because I really like the Grixis color combination. Grixis is what it was called on Alara, and that is blue, red, and black. And this mechanic is called Casualty, the mechanic for this group, as you can see here on a little chat. And Casualty looks like a pretty cool mechanic to me. It's basically a mechanic that is going to combine sacrifice decks with spell decks, and that's like a very Grixis thing to do. So as you can see on a little chat, it has Casualty 1, and all of the cards with Casualty have a numerical value following it. And whatever that value is, means you can sacrifice a creature when you cast this with that much power, and if you do, you get a copy. So if you cast a little chat and sacrifice something with 1 power, you get to cast it twice. And that's pretty nice. I mean, you end up paying 2 mana to look at the top 4 cards of your library and put 2 of them into your hand. And that's like a pretty powerful draw effect, especially at instant speed. And so it seems to me like the Maestros are going to combine like good sacrifice fodder with probably also some other spell payoffs and things like that to make for a pretty cohesive spell deck that has a pretty strong sacrifice thing going on thanks to the Casualty mechanic, and looks pretty cool to me. I'm excited to see some more cards with it, some of the interesting things you could do. But this uncommon, if you can, even if you're not consistently casualtying this instant here, this a little chat, it's still a decent card. But once you are sacrificing something and getting it going, it's going to feel like you're really doing something, especially if the thing you sacrifice like gives you a token or gains you life or whatever. So looks pretty cool. Like all of these mechanics, I like it. Maestros looks interesting. I'm excited to see this sort of spell / sacrifice deck that Casualty seems to be really built around. So next up, it's the Riveteers. This is the black, red, green combination known as Jund on Alara. And their mechanic is Blitz, as you can see on Jaxis, the Troublemaker here. And this mechanic looks pretty cool. So for 1 generic and a red, in the case of Jaxis, you can cast her. That's the alternate cost. And when you do, she has haste, and you have to sacrifice her at the beginning of the next end step. But you also draw a card when she dies. And that is going to be interesting to see as alternate costs. The fact that they all draw you a card when they die means that you're really going to be okay in terms of card advantage. And you're also going to give your opponent, sometimes they could maybe block the thing you're attacking with. But obviously a trade with one of these is atrocious because it gives you a 2-for-1. And they also don't want to let you draw that card before your in step, probably, right? So people aren't going to be willing to block very many of these, so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of abilities they have. In the case of Jaxis, you have a card that has an activated ability too, so you could use that right away if you blitz her into play, and she makes a token copy of something. Even a temporary one can be pretty powerful sometimes. But yeah, in general, Blitz looks like it's going to be a nice sort of aggressive mechanic that will allow you to do damage quickly because of haste. And while it's going to hurt your board development a little bit because you're not going to be putting a thing into play that stays in play if you're blitzing it. But the fact that you draw a card helps soften that blow a little bit. And, if the other cards we see with Blitz, like, it's going to be interesting. Some cards will probably have a more expensive Blitz depending on what they do than their regular casting cost. I would imagine most of them have a cheaper one, but either way, it looks like a cool mechanic. I'm interested to see it show up on other cards, how they utilize it. And this looks like, sort of typical of Jund decks. I mean, it can be sort of aggressive, but it's probably kind of a grindy mid-range type thing, because you need to take advantage of the cards you're drawing off of these and stuff like that. So Yeah, that's the new mechanic for the Riveteers in the new set in New Capenna. So we've only got one group left, and that group is the Brokers. They are green, white, and blue. That's Bant, as it was known on as Alara. And their mechanic is shield counters, which you can see on Disciplined Duelist here. These shield counters are interesting. So creatures are going to have these. I would guess it's going to be creatures only that we see them on, but I guess we'll see. And if a creature has a shield counter on it, if your creature is dealt damage or destroyed, you remove a shield counter from it instead. So this is going to make creatures more durable. You know, it's sort of like a temporary hexproof or protection that only fires off once. It's a little different than that because there are going to be times where, like, your creature taking damage at all loses their shield counter, and if that damage wasn't already lethal, that's going to be kind of annoying. The Disciplined Duelist gets around that a little bit thanks to Double Strike, so things just aren't going to hit it. You know, it's going to kill smaller things, so things that would hurt the Duelist and kill it, you know, even if it trades with it, won't anymore. So, like, if you block a 4/4 or attack into a 4/4 with this, the Duelist will just kill it and lose its shield counter and stay in play. And that sounds pretty sweet, especially if you can augment it more. There are very likely to be other ways to use shield counters and consume them for value and things like that. It'll be interesting to see in general how they work, but expect for the Brokers creatures to be really obnoxious to deal with in some situations, thanks to their shield counters, which are going to really give you a headache in terms of dealing with the creatures. So yeah, that is the Broker mechanic. It's all about these shield counters, which means it's probably also a creature-based deck largely, and annoying, hard-to-kill creatures probably being the big theme. So those are the 5 mechanics for the 5 families, the 5 3-color factions within the Streets of New Capenna. There's also one returning mechanic that is not associated with one faction or another. It's just throughout the set, and that is Hideaway. Hideaway is not a mechanic we've seen much of. We saw it in Lorwyn quite a long time ago, and I think it came back in one of the Modern Horizons sets on like 2 cards. So it looks like it's going to be back in greater force in this particular set. And the way Hideaway works in this set, at least, is that there's a Hideaway value, in this case 5, and that means you look at the top 5 cards of your library when the thing enters the battlefield, and you exile 1 face down and put the rest on the bottom of your library, and then you have to meet some sort of requirement, and if you do, you end up getting to cast that card without paying its mana cost. So that's pretty powerful. Wiretapping is definitely kind of a clunky enchantment, but it already draws you an extra card every turn. So it, you know, that kind of card often really snowballs. The downside, of course, is you're paying 5 mana for a card that doesn't do anything immediately. But drawing cards with this already is kind of a nice effect. It's going to depend on how fast the format is, whether you can afford to play this and just tap out. But, you know, this has already a powerful effect. It's going to be a little hard to trigger the Hideaway on this in Limited. I mean, because you have to have 9 cards in your hand. And that's not easy to do in Limited. If you have 9 cards in your hand, you're either not adding to the board or you're like mana screwed or something. But if you have this in play, that's just not going to happen. So I wouldn't expect to trigger it on this particular card. One thing to keep in mind, and we'll see if it shows up on the creatures, if there are any creatures with Hideaway. In the past, part of the mechanic is that your creature enters the battlefield tapped. It's in the reminder text. It's not something that is immediately intuitive about the mechanic. So, when actually it was on lands too, and they came into play tapped as part of the effect back in the day. So, interestingly, this enchantment does not come into play tapped, but that may also just be because it would be meaningless if it did for the most part. We'll have to see as we see it on other cards. It may be that it's all on enchantments or something like that. But either way, you know, it's kind of fun, these effects in Limited, where you have some quest you can complete, and if you do, you can get something pretty powerful like casting a spell for free, which is nice on top of drawing cards. But like I said, this is definitely slow, and actually achieving the Hideaway mission here is going to be difficult. So that's a very early look at the new mechanics and returning mechanic, Hideaway, in Streets of New Capenna. As always, you know, I get really excited about these new sets. They're always a lot of fun. My set review is right around the corner. It'll begin next Friday, so, you know, 6 days from when this video goes up. That also means that I have my ongoing notes, set notes for the set review going up on my Patreon. So if you want to see sort of some more early thoughts of mine as we see more and more preview cards, that will be available if you're a patron. If you're not a patron and you want to see that, check it out. And yeah, doing the set review, getting ready for a new set is always a really fun time, and I'm glad it comes, 4 times a year or whatever, because it's always a good time. Let me know what you think about the mechanics and stuff in this new set, how you think things are going to play out. By the time you guys are all commenting and everything, you'll have like 2 days more information than I do, so I'm sure there'll be some things that have changed or shifted from what I had to say in this video, but yeah. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it. If you want to make sure you catch future content, including a bunch more about New Capenna, including my set review, draft videos, editions of Nizzanotes exclusively about this new set, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on past limited content of mine, you should see some playlists on your screen shortly. And like I said, if you want to go the extra mile in supporting the channel, you get some benefits like access to my early notes for the set review. You can go that extra mile on Patreon. Thanks for watching.